Here is a man, a human being, with an extraordinary mind and grace and talent, always falling on the correct side of moral rectitude, in my opinion. Born in Chicago, Illinois, he was the founder and managing editor of Chicago's Choice magazine with John Logan and Aaron Siskine. He has had 12 books published, 1 of prose, intimacies, and 11 of poetry, most recently improvisation, poet impressions from contemporary music. He often reads his work with musicians from the avant-garde ensembles Wormhole in Yokohama and Tokyo, Japan, and the Truma Flora Collective, San Diego, California. In the course of his career, he has been awarded prizes and honors, including Arts Fellowship from the Helene Wurlitzer Foundation in Taos, New Mexico. After an 8-year writing retreat in Barcelona, Spain, he now makes his home in Beacon, New York, where he edits and publishes a poetry magazine, Waymark Voices of the Valley, and has assembled his first collection of selected and new poems. You can read and hear examples of his work at www.rogeraplon.com. It gives me sincere pleasure to bring up our friend, Roger Aplon.
Thank you, Hayden, and thank you all for coming. Good evening. This is a celebration for me. Hayden has asked to publish 4 volumes of my collected works, and I'm going to read from the first 2 tonight, first 2 volumes, which includes work from 6 books, and I won't keep you here that long. But I also wanted to point out the fact that, yes, I do have a selected and new poems that is coming out, that came out about the end of May, and is up there for you to take a look at if you'd like to.
Camera.
Have I got it right now? Okay.
I want people to experience you, not the microphone.
All right, sorry. I'm not going to read any pieces from Mustering What's Left. I am going to read the pieces, some of the pieces from these collections that did not enter into that book, only because too many times. And for me, going back this far to 1976, when this first collection, which is the first in this book, was published, I was pretty young and anxious to get started as a writer, and now I'm looking back at 40 years of publishing, and it's a great honor to have Hayden celebrate it for me. So without further ado, although I have one caveat, I'm not particularly interested in political correctness, but neither are a number of the people that appear in this collection of poems. I've always thought of a poet as someone who is a witness on this earth and writes about what he or she sees and hears and tries to be as accurate as possible. So rather than offend you, I wanted to warn you of some of the characters that appear in these pages. The first section of the book, called Stiletto, was made up of monologues in different voices. And I'm going to read one of them to you now. It's called It's a Cinch. Yeah, I found the Plymouth where you said you'd leave it, and the trail of Coors cans that kept me going before they petered out. Been camped here 3 weeks. My food's running low, and I'm pissed. Wherever you gone can't be that good. Maybe it's best we split. I'm about due for a rest, and following you ain't no fun. Remember that time in Denver when I'd hang round the Squire till you got off? I like that. Seeing you ditch the boss to leave with me. And the scene in Shy when the ex-cop tried to make time and I had to pistol whip the motherfucker just to get you out. Spent 6 weeks in the slam and never did know where you'd gone. Ain't this never gonna stop? Trucking over hell and freezing my ass to boot. One more day and I'm gone. Even if you showed up right now, even if that lights your car, I don't think I'd care. But then, I've known worse, I guess. And if it's you coming on so slow, I'll make room and maybe find a bit of food. You must be hungry after all this time. It's a cinch. I ain't gonna starve the best piece of ass in North Kansas. Let me keep track of the time. Hayden says I have 40 minutes or so, but I don't think I'm going to ask you to survive that. Moving away. 3 short pieces. Sparrows hide in the grass, ruffling the skin of the mantis, gnawing the shoulder of its mate, as he puts it to her. She eats a lot, working to eat all of him before. I won't stop the singing in the garden, or the beetles. I won't hunt the toads pumping the damp clay. I won't drive the water from the eyes of eels, or tear the sprig of green thread that holds your sweat to your breasts. The caterpillar humps along the knotted branch of an apple tree. His furred skin is white and marked with a hint of orange. His eyes are buried and his nose is black. I follow him the length of the branch, feeling his body ball and bristle as my hand closes over. He's safe. I'll only stroke his fur and put him somewhere else to watch him move away. This is a piece I wrote after a photograph by a friend of mine named Jim Koch, who found me online recently and reminded me that we've been friends for 40 years. He has a studio in California. It's a double exposure, so you have this picture of this naked woman, and the way he's done it, the branches of trees and elements from nature are covering parts of her body. The photographer's wife. Your eyes are stuffed with the kind of brush you'd find in the ravines in November. A lake slides along your mouth. Trees and thin ferns grope your face. I'm careful to avoid the roots he's buried in your narrow chest. Look for a way inside. Carry matches, a pint of cooked soup. It may take weeks, but once the lean-to's built, I'll be very quiet and keep the fire low. If you're not back before the snow, I'll stay. Hunt in the spring. Sweep away the dead stuff and listen for the wind to call the big leaves back to the center of your startled eye. In 1976, pardon me, in the 70s, the Vietnam War, the FBI was everywhere, and there were armies marching everywhere. I'm going to read a piece now that was based on a friend of mine's house being ransacked by the FBI. It's called The Planting and Nurturing of the Latest Garden. When the dude with the big ears and no hair kicked down the door, the chandeliers jumped on their wires, cottonmouths raced under lace doilies, snapping up purple hearts and disappearing in the pocket of head waiters. It was a great set. Jimmy stomped the son of a bitch while I collected donations from the ladies' auxiliary, filling and refilling my canteen with Chanel number 5. Joanne sloshed Old Crow in the hammock, crocheting bluebirds under lavender jacket, her smile lighting up the fire escape like a cluster of new nasturtiums. This is a truly New York poem. When we were doing Choice Magazine, we would come to New York once a year when the issue was out and go to the 8th Street bookstore on McDougal Street and then stay over for a few days or whatever. This was me at the Chelsea Hotel. It's called Roaches. When I lifted the water glass and found the dead roach, I thought, good shot. But opening the closet to find another glass over another roach, and next to the bed another glass over another dead roach, I split. But the elevator froze between floors, and it's been days. The stench grows worse. I've been wrapping my shit in bits of cloth till all I've got on are shorts and a vest. The roaches nuzzle me in the little pile of clothes. They hum, you know. Like small reeds, they vibrate. I hum back, trying to make friends. One, the largest, sleeps in my pocket. We're getting along just fine, and I dread the time when I'll have to begin eating him. Training the army. There are armies crossing Nebraska, armies that fatten on leftover cows, armies so silent and sure they lumber over the day, unmindful of sweat, forgetting rivers crossed and recrossed. I'm trailing the army, gouging huge holes in their water bags, clipping the sharp eyes of their bayonets, exhausting their mother with stories of past atrocities. Someone has to follow. Someone must nip at the wide black haunch. They are well organized and have learned the rewards of cutting everything down. Everything that grows on its own is suspect. No one has survived the wave on wave of their perfect form. Even the frogs fall game. The nights are filled with their music. They mimic the chords and pipes of human throats. In Kansas City, there are people already overcome. In St. Louis, there are people of knowledge catching planes. In Detroit, no one has even begun to care. No offense to Detroit, but it just was the city that came up in how the imagination works. This is a quote from a newspaper in Chicago when the first homeless people started appearing on the streets back in the 70s. It says, it's a quote from a survivor. Some kids set me on fire. They poured kerosene on me from a milk container and lit me with matches. The skies collapsed, white mice in blown glass, pack oranges, sucking lethal baskets of yams. They run under the exhilaration of death, feet sizzling through rivers of rain. Their nails nip the cement in a tattoo of tiny rockets. The air is liquid with lettuce and an avalanche of laughing eyes. At the end of Avenue B, hovering in the roots of old hands, a stink of furious fingers soundlessly gagging. Oh, very generous, thank you. This is a divorce poem called The Arsonist. So that October night, I burned the lot. Harry roasted ribs over your underwear, squeezed sterno through your pale blue peignoir. The silver brooch with the fucking horses, scorched sea green. Books by Potter, toasted brown as bees. I saved the bindle of cocaine and an ounce of Thai weed. Smoked it with the crew from Engine 5. Stoned and waving a hose around the edge, I thought I saw your face, giggling in the bubbling tar, your arms stuffed with pillows and fake amber beads. If you're ever back in town, Jermaine's got your jade earrings and the locket with cuttings of our pubic hair. Be sure to look me up. I'm generally listed. This is a departure piece called Grandfather. It's from the second collection called It's Mother's Day. Or the third collection, I'm sorry. Even after all these years, I know you mute. Maybe your thick Russian accent, limited English, more likely years of bartering for food, your son's undisguised resentment. But you spoke brilliantly with dogs. It said you once raised sleek and silky Irish setters on scraps. And when ours, a small Springer Spaniel whose name I've forgotten, came to heat, you locked her in our summer house, setting yourself in a chair with cane in hand to head off stray males who were sure to come. You stayed all afternoon and well into dusk, daring the determined to come and get it. One did, big and blotched and shaggy, at a run till he fixed on you, circling back and forth, 20 yards from your perch where you followed him with your eyes, raising your cane and rapping a string of Russian curses each time he'd wheel. When the sun set, you'd take her out for a walk on a short leash, then lock her in when the coast was clear. Your dinner'd be cold, but you didn't care, and kept the same routine until her season passed. What did fear you for her? Certainly not the sex. Maybe a distrust of mongrels. Reminders of your youth in the shuttles of Minsk, where only the pure of blood were safe among their own. How am I doing? Okay. Here's I'm going to do a longer poem. This is a poem, we talk about the news. Obviously the news hasn't changed much in the course of 40 years. It's always rather damaging to realize just how far down we can go. This is called Confronting the News Today, and it's an homage to a poet, Paul Carroll, from Chicago, in celebration after reading his Ode to Severin Darden, which is a rather famous piece that we published in Choice. It was written as Kerouac wrote on the road I guess it's whatever the paper is that never ends, teletyping. And it was this long, we folded it up and published it in the back of the book. But this one wasn't in the book, this is a new one. There was a new one in I think this was 1980 something. Confronting the news today feels like coming into a room where someone you love is talking intimately with someone you hate. Like receiving a letter from an old friend who has never written to you before, but who you thought of often and whose death you dreamt of just last night. Like knowing a young girl is being sold to other men by her father. Or coming to visit your son who has returned from Europe 3 weeks ago but neglected to let you know. Confronting the news today feels like making love to a lover from your past who has forgotten all your prior couplings. Hearing a voice that reminds you of the affections of your first wife who you've come to detest. Like eating the most celebrated item from a restaurant's dinner selection only to find it oversauced, overdone, and cold. Or hearing your autocratic father will be coming to stay for the summer. Or having to deworm your new puppy every week for a month. Confronting the news feels like smelling the last rose of summer in a doctor's office where you've come to determine whether or not the growth on your back is malignant or benign. Or tasting shit on the tip of your pet's tongue who you've always suspected of eating her feces but never had proof. Or discovering that not one angel can dance on the end of a pin, and that in fact angels can't dance. Or like tenderly fondling the brassiere-clad breasts of your first girlfriend only to find them to be stuffed with Kleenex. Or trying to sexually satisfy that same girlfriend, but finding that you can't sustain an erection. Confronting the news feels like mistaking a skunk for an affectionate stray cat and sweeping it into your arms. Or joining a club that searches for lost children only to find the leader to be a pedophile. Or like opening your refrigerator after you've been away for a month without knowing that while you were gone, your electric power had been disconnected. The news feels like offering to assist a wobbly alcoholic to the cross streets, only to have him unceremoniously vomit on your shoes. Or waking suddenly from a dream in which you were about to climax inside someone you love, only to find your home engulfed in flames. Or like hearing that your name has been selected from a hat to win the local lottery, but you weren't home to take the call. Or finding your wife's been shacking up with her karate instructor in your house while you've been working an extra job to buy her a real mink coat. Confronting the news today, confronting the news today feels like it's time to consider an extended vacation, read permanent move, to some ancient city, born of an ancient civilization, very far away, where you do not speak the language and cannot read the local paper. After the war, hustlers stalked the streets hawking their mother's pearls, their sister's virginity, over and over their daughter's succulent, tipped-up tits. After the war, we'll ignore our father's failed vision, picnic at midnight, pose in purple robes, ride a stallion, eat fire. On these nights, Sheila will cake her eyelids blue, dance on her back, wrap her legs around my waist, arch up, muscles tense, lick my belly, sweat. After the war, old men will tear their wives from trailer parks in Galveston or Peoria, rev up engines long left to rust, and hit the road. Kids with one foot in the gutter will step to the plate, plant their weight, and hit a big one for mom and dad, or step off the curb, or run into a cab, or climb off the top rung, or sail out into another night, unmasked, tattooed, gone. After the war, the thunder you'll hear from the hills will be just that, thunder from the hills and rain. I'll end this book with a poem I wrote for my good friends Josie and Denny Zeitlin. Denny Zeitlin being one of the country's finest jazz musicians. They have a small house outside of San Francisco in Marin County that she has landscaped beautifully, and this is a koi pond that they have in their yard, or had then. This garden, these koi, for Josie and Denny Zeitlin. They've been with us for several years. They eat from our hands. They lift their curved lips ever so slightly. They suck our fingers. We stretch out along the bank of the pond, dangling a free hand in the cool water. With the other, we stroke each other's neck, occasionally nibbling here and there. This garden, these koi, hyacinth, lavender, mist in the late afternoon, the simple rhythms of falling water. This garden, these koi, my hand along your back, your fingers in my mouth. Well, I see there's a little time for reading a few pieces from the other collection. I'm going to read one piece from the book called Barcelona Diary. It's a rather long book, represented in here by almost 200 pages. It's very funny. This is not so funny. It's rather coincidental. The poem's called September 11. But on September 11 in Barcelona, they have a festival which is now turned into an actual run for independence to celebrate their history when they were a country. And they have parades and people talk and people gather in large groups and mobs, and they come down to the place where the war ended in 1714 outside of a graveyard. In Phosphor de les Moreres, cemetery of the mulberry trees, lie the remains of those who died during the siege of Barcelona in 1714, which ended the War of Spanish Succession. But the keepers laid the invaders beyond the trees and only patriots to the center. So too the digger who found his son a traitor and tossed him out as well. Such is the lot of the soldier. But it's Fiesta Nacional de Catalunya, when the flag is flown high and the anthem plays all day, and the graveyard, paved now and host to an eternal flame, swells with memories of the old gravedigger, and cheers for free Catalunya resound around the walls of the church of Santa Maria del Mar, and peddlers hawk keychains and pendants and pins, and the story of the siege is acted out and images exhumed. And we're tempted to raise our arms and salute and cheer, whistle and march with our banner raised, but we are stranger here and have no claim. So we step aside and only snap a picture and leave down the quiet street of the whores, for a coffee and an early lunch. But we wear our Catalan flag in our lapel and nod to all who pass and smile, and for a moment, we do belong. Something about that date, I guess. I had a good friend named Neil. I'm going to do this all night long. I had a good friend named Neil Learman who died a few years back and had a favorite place on the coast of Catalonia called, on the Costa Brava, a little town called Tossa de Mar, where at one time they shot a movie, The Flying Dutchman, where Ava Gardner was a star, and they now have a statue of her along the castle walk. And everybody stops to touch her breasts, so they're very shiny. The rest of her looks like a normal bronze statue. But I wrote this letter to Neil when I was there and he was not, which was kind of rare because he went every summer. And there's a reference in here to Brian's Quest. And Brian's Quest was part of a novel he wrote called Perdute, which took place during the reign of Franco, and the Guardia Civil was on the roads, and Brian was trying to join a group of revolutionaries, and of course died in the event. Well, Neil, here I am, striding up the mountain, scaling the Roman parapets past a suspiciously muted Ava Gardner, past stack on stack of lavish condos, past Siva's disco bar, closed till midnight, and Dolly's whimsical cock, which curls like a snail feeding, and the beach with its aroma of baking flesh and couples and kids and lovers and single women, and men from all the latitudes and longitudes of the planet who gathered to massage the summer, but not quite, like the family of '69, when seekers were on the road and the haven in the mist became your myth and text, and you flew like a swallow from these heights to eat your fill, and now the memories survive in neon, and a weathered flag unfurls at the entrance to the cave, as one by one your brothers and sisters fall away, their vision faint, their compact breached. The last bring their teenage kids and chaperone them into the night, which you bit off, knob by knot, and chewed or swallowed whole. So adieu and fin saviat, and today the early light, and one more time I'll swim the bay and dodge the power boats and oil slicks and ferries and yachts and remember Brian's Quest and the danger and intrigue of that time when war was a recent memory and the Guardia lined the roads and their black hats and cloaks defined the hills and borders were best crossed at daylight. And still we could drink it down in one quick shot and savor it and swoon and spit in the serpent's eye. A few more. Two more. Okay. In that case, let me pick out of these four the two. I think this first one would be appropriate. I've been writing a lot of prose poems, and I'll read this, and then I'll read one, well, you'll see. May 31, 2000. She stands at the window and smokes, and the ash lengthens on her cigarette, but she doesn't notice and stares down at the street that is slick from the morning rain and sees the traffic and hears the horns and smokes, and the ash falls on her gown, but she doesn't notice and leaves the window and walks back to her bedroom and puts out her cigarette and removes her clothes and stops to light another and walks to the bath and takes a moment to relieve herself and put out her cigarette and steps into the shower and runs the water, a bit cool, this being June. And already a warm film has settled over the city, and she washes away her agitation, but not her dream from last night, in which she swam out too far and could not breathe, and the hands that held her pinched and prodded, and now she runs the water colder and rinses what is left down the drain and steps out onto her shiny white floor and wraps herself in a towel and lights another cigarette and exhales into the mirror that tells her not to drink her scotch into the early hours and not to eat her fill of chocolate. And she turns back to the room with only one window and sits and looks out on the city that has become calmer and more ordered, and lights another cigarette from the last and crosses her legs and smokes. Well, you've been more than an enthusiastic audience. Thank you for your support. I'm going to read a piece that's rather strange. It's called "My Friends Have Been Having an Adulterous Affair." Some of it's comical, some of it, no. He's been needing a tart surprise, and she's a model craving a wider lens, and when someone offered him a martini, she ate the olive, and when he dipped his brush in the red oil, she bent over backwards, preparing a smile and swallowing hard, and he stopped smoking and knelt for communion and ate the body and remembered how long it had been between meals. And she launched a few balls in the air to jiggle and juggle, and no one tossed in the towel or shut down the oven, and their goose burst its skin, and his stuffing flew, and grapes, and he'd been grafting in her pickled tongue, and in this reel they move across sand, growing smaller into the trees, and pop up full-faced and grinning and slightly distorted. And in the next, she's pregnant, or just pretending, with a puppy under her coat to suckle her breast with its thick nipple, and wisps of dark hair. And in the last frame, she shows her naked ass, as if this is the end, or is it the beginning? And out of camera range, she takes her shot of lemon heart rum, while he tries his luck at the family's antique nickel slots.